everybody, this is Elle Nagy from the Unapologetic Women Empowerment Dynasty, and you're listening to the Unapologetic Women podcast, the show for women who choose to live their legacies, unleashed, unlimited, and unapologetic. If this is a space you're curious about, visit unapologetic-women.com. Today we're talking about navigating womanhood, growth, and compassion with Deborah Tyson. Deborah is committed to the ongoing improvement of the world we live in and believes in the power of each individual. Her simple, succinct, and practical approach to raising awareness allows people to connect to true peace and happiness regardless of external circumstances. For that reason, she founded Bliss Spot, an online community transforming everyday lives through encouragement, sharing, education, inspiration, and connection in the changing world today. Through community, education, and technology, Bliss Spot focuses on sharing skills to support individuals and businesses to step into their true power and prosper. Thanks for joining us. This is Deborah. So welcome. Oh my goodness. Really excited because I am loving the experience of introduction in my life at the moment. The experience of women consistently and continuously introducing me to more amazing women in the world. And it has been life-changing for me in the last year since starting this podcast. In the way that I experience and perceive women. Because I find that a lot of the great women are not necessarily the ones that are very loud in the world right now and front and center in the world right now. It's like the greatness is happening a lot of the times in the intimate spaces and conversations. And so really the only way to be introduced to these women is through true trust and appreciation of each other and kind of going, you need to meet so-and-so. So by this time when somebody goes, you need to meet so-and-so, I'm like, oh,
I love that.
something fabulous is going to happen. So thank you for coming into my life and coming onto the podcast.
Such a pleasure, Elle. It's, so delightful to be here. And I absolutely loved our last conversation that we had, just an informal conversation that was so inspiring to me also. And I love what you're talking about because it's more like being in the flow. And I think there's a groundswell of beautiful women all around the globe, bringing their beautiful gifts, their intuition, compassion, wisdom, for this new change or this shift that's happening in the world at the moment. So I love the way that you view it like that. There are so many amazing women in the world. So it's beautiful that you appreciate that. And it's very special.
It's a good time to be alive. It's a really good time to be alive. Completely off topic. We went to go and watch Barbie last week. And because there was such a big hoo-ha that's being made about the movie. So I thought, okay, well, let's go and watch. And I was a little saddened by the movie and how really, I know it comes from good intention, but it's so dishonoring of where we as women are finding ourselves already by bringing in a very old narrative and then keeping the struggle of patriarchy alive in bringing it back into the conversation. And it's always curious for me how people keep saying what you focus on grows, but they don't understand that what you focus on grows, including the stuff that you say that you want to move away from. The more you talk about it, the more it still grows. And I feel like we as women have moved so much further along than that. And it's time for us to kind of go, no, we're good. We don't have to have that conversation anymore. What is the conversation that we really want to focus on? And I'm finding that's wisdom that's coming through right now.
I find that really interesting. I love it that you've brought that up. And I love it because as you and I discussed in our last conversation, which I also loved, it's okay to have different perspectives because I happened to be invited to the premiere of that movie in Sydney, and I was lucky enough to take my daughter. And the thing is, I saw that completely differently. So I'm interested in your perspective, but the way I saw it, two of the things I took out of it, which I think are relevant to this conversation, is the first thing, I love the way that woman went on about how women are expected to be everything. And like, we can't, like, we're too pretty, we're not pretty enough, we're too smart, we're not. And I really related to that, because I think women, society does, we even put on ourselves, and we can't be everything, and we're okay. Just, we don't need to multi-skill ourselves to death. And so I love that message. I thought that was very powerful and very well done. And I also, the thing I loved about that movie was the way that Ken had to go and find himself. Like, it was so cute, because for years and years and years, I think that women have been made out to be that they cling to men, they look to a man for their everything, when they've got the man with all the money and all those things in society puts up as important, and they've hit the jackpot. So I really love the way, because I've just never thought of it like that. I thought, hey, wait a minute, women are very strong. And I'm absolutely not for women being in front of men or dominating men at all. I think this new shift is about us walking beside each other as equals, true equals, and really cherishing and loving each other's gifts. So that's what I think this movement's about. But I loved it because women have been made out to be the weaker sex for years. Not that we want to go on about the old patriarchy thing, but I think we still do have a ways to go. I think even in the younger generation, still, got lessons about women and women's self-worth, and maybe it's not always the woman clinging, like, in a way, well, this is probably going to be a little bit controversial, but in a way, almost men need women more than women need men. And I think that happens when people break up or have a divorce. A woman is able to quite often go out and find herself and find a true passion and go forward, whereas a man will quickly get into that. This is generalizations, obviously it's not for everything, but a man will quickly get into that next relationship because they need that woman. And I heard one of my friends, which I thought was so adorable, her mother, who's actually sadly passed away now, but when she's in her 70s or so, she goes, oh my God, I wouldn't want another relationship at this age. I don't want to be cooking and looking after a man. I'm having too much fun going out with my girlfriends and doing all this stuff. And I'm not saying that, relationships are bad. And of course, it's lovely to have a relationship in your 70s if that works. But it's just the idea of it. And I think this movement is about women finding themselves, which I think we've been on a movement of that, for the last 20 or 30 years. A lot of women have done personal journeys, and now they're just out there sharing this wisdom now for this groundswell, for this big change, holding that space and that beautiful, loving, creating that beautiful platform that we do so well. But I think it's for men too, poor men. I really feel for them, because a lot of them have ended up being lawyers or accountants or doctors or whatever because they thought it was the right thing to do for money, bankers. Maybe it's not their true passion though, and then that leads to discontent, which spills out in all other areas of their life, for women too. But I think men are under a lot of pressure, so I think this is a big shift all over. So I thought the Barbie movie was really cute in those two themes. Yeah, so
I love this. And this is the whole point, right?
Yeah.
It's diverse thinking, and this is the richness of the experience that I think most people don't allow themselves, because they would go, oh, do I now have to agree with Deborah, or do I have to change my point of view? And it's like, no, I get to experience that through you, and then still come back to myself and go, and still for me, it is because I've never been part of that conversation. And so it wasn't relatable to me. I can't relate to the conversation of that we are expected to be all things, because I've come to the understanding that's only the self-expectation. Like, we keep on blaming society and going, society has put it upon us that we have to be all things. But that's a story we're telling ourselves. And in that, all of that expectation comes from within us, which we are then projecting on society. So when I was listening to that, on the one hand, I was like, oh, yeah, I remember that story. But because it's not a story that I'm telling anymore, I couldn't relate to anything of that in the movie. I was just thinking, this is an old narrative. Where are the people with the new narrative? And again, isn't that just beautiful as well for us to understand that we all get to have different narratives in life at this time? And I don't need to make that narrative wrong, because it is. The movie got applause at the end from the entire cinema. I was probably the only person sitting there going, huh? Like, really? Are we still here? Everybody else resonated so powerfully with it that they literally applauded the movie. And then I came to the realization again, it's beautiful when we start understanding that we get to have diverse conversations in open-minded spaces, because we're all like-hearted. We all want the best for society. We all want the best for each other. I do think that one of the things that's highlighted, though, is not really men and women and the relationship and needing to now go and find ourselves apart from each other, because that's just independence again. And I feel that the new consciousness is interdependence. So we are clearly seeing how codependency is being depicted in society and in relationships, which is extraordinarily unhealthy for both parties. And I have discovered that we have to almost live through an evolution, in my experience, of codependence to independence to interdependence. And I'm just kind of wondering, when will that conversation start being the new norm instead of the independence conversation, which I thought we were further down the line than that. But clearly we're not.
Well, perhaps too, as a leader, like you've been through that process and you are where you're at in your journey, but I don't say this in a judgmental way, because that's not fair either. People are where we're at. Everybody's where they're at, and that's absolutely okay. But I think a lot of people are, it's still a lot of things, like you have to have a relationship to be happy. That's all still fed to us in movies and all sorts of things. And you probably evolved to this stage. I totally agree. You learn and grow in relationships. Relationships are fantastic. And it is about interdependence, where you can be your own person, but also still but have a healthy relationship rather than being codependent. So I totally agree with that. And I think mankind is heading down that path, but I think it takes time. And maybe this movie was helping a lot of people who are still in that growth journey. Like, a lot of people have done a growth journey early, and they're probably now the leaders, like yourself, who are stepping up now. But I think a lot of people are still on the path, and that's absolutely fine too. Like, we are where we're at.
Yes,
at the moment.
Absolutely. And I wrote a post this morning of, stop chasing the mirages. And in the post, I write about the fact that we're all walking on the same globe, but none of us are actually walking on the same journey. And so I don't feel like one of us is ahead of another. We're simply on different consciousness journeys in this life experience. And that is brilliant. That is beautiful. I think that
For sure. Yeah.
there is no somebody is ahead of somebody else. My goodness. I think the interdependence as well that I'm referring to goes so way beyond the romantic dependence, codependence, interdependence, to the realization of the interdependence of the cosmos. Interdependence in that when we start realizing that we really have nothing to prove, whether in our personal lives or in our professional lives, we start creating an interdependent dance, not only with all other humans. Let me reframe that, because we are already dancing with everybody. It's a conscious dance. It's a conscious interdependence of wanting to see how the strands are interwoven to form this tapestry, not only with other people, but with the universe at large. And for me, when we start playing in that space, the old conversations no longer resonate because we see everything differently. It's almost as though I'm having a different life experience of our planet than most people right now. And it's interesting for me to sit, even while I was sitting in the movie, and watching everybody's response around me, and then watching my response to the movie to go, wow, this is fascinating. We are all in the exact same moment, in the exact same space, and we're all having such a different experience. And that is probably one of the most important highlights from this conversation for our listeners, because everybody who's listening to this conversation is having a different experience of this conversation. That's the magic. That's Wonderland. That is us in Wonderland.
For sure. And I remember really feeling like that at an Anthony Robbins seminar that I went to, because I've always been into personal growth and I love hearing life learn. I love hearing new ideas. And took me quite a long time to get there. I remember I went when my daughter was 2. So I think I was wanting to go to one for 10 years. And I eventually got there and I just felt like a fish out of water. Everybody was clapping and cheering and I just wasn't resonating or relating. And that was, in fact, I don't think I've really ever had that in another seminar, but I really felt like that in that moment. And that's just where I was at. But I think, further to what you're saying, one of my most favorite sayings is there are no others. And that's true, because everybody is really just a fragment of ourself in all their pain, all their glory, whatever's going on. I really relate to that, but it's sometimes hard to forget to remember that on a daily basis when you're struggling or somebody says something that triggers you, because we're all having a human experience as well. But my yoga teacher said that to me about 20 years ago. It was just like this massive light bulb went off, and because I was complaining about somebody I was having an issue with, and he said, there are no others. And I went, oh, he's right. I just totally got it. So you're right. It is a big tapestry of life, and we're all of the same energy moving forward in our own ways. So it is an exciting time to be alive with this big, massive shift that's happening.
And would it be lovely if more people gave themselves permission to not make their experience wrong? Just because your experience is different doesn't mean that your experience is wrong, and neither is anybody else's. I think that can get lost in translation as well sometimes. It's not about, I think that people have become afraid of having these rich conversations of difference in perspective, difference in experience, because there's almost a culture of we all have to be the same. Everybody says that we're all unique, but it's like we all expected to be having the same experience, especially if we are in a specific field. Like if we're in personal development, we're all expected to have this kind of experience and to have this kind of a voice. And then if we are in architecture, we are supposed to experience life this way and conversations this way and to create this way. Instead of going, no, we can all sit in the same room and we can all have a different experience, and we can all celebrate our unique experience without thinking it has to conform to the room, and we don't need the room's experience to conform to ours. That's what becomes so rich. It's like, oh my goodness, I want to hear other people's experience that's different from my own. I have a little bit of a pet peeve against the current narrative of surrounding ourselves with like-minded people. Like, no, I don't want to surround myself with like-minded people. What's the purpose of that? Like-hearted. I want people to come from a good space. I want people to come from, they want to live a good life. Yes, absolutely. But I want people to think differently from me. I want people to have their own critical thinking capacity and to share that with me unafraid, because they're not being judged. I just want to allow myself to immerse into their experience, into their thought process in the moment, because I find it fascinating. And I think it's extraordinary that we can all have the capacity to think differently and all walk and look more or less the same.
Well, when you think about it, just even from a basic common sense perspective, it's absolutely impossible to all have the same experience, because we're all brought up in, even though our true essence is love and wisdom, compassion, all those things, we've all got that. That's what binds us together. But we're all put into different families. We had, different family life. We had different conditioning. I really believe that even if you took the worst criminal, and people have done this, and I've heard people speak about it, and then you hear them talk about their family life, you just have so much compassion, because there are always reasons for people's behaviors. And I'm not saying that it's right, but I think people are the way they are for good reason, usually speaking, with their defenses and patterns and layers. So that's one aspect of it. But then I think quite strongly too, there's another aspect, whereas human beings, if we see things that are not right, like, violence or abuse, or we have a right, if we can make positive change, to make that as well. Like, I love the story of Jesus in the temple with the money changers. Like, he didn't just go, well, I'm all love and peace and light, and I'll just be a model and they'll see me and everything will be great. He actually made a massive stand around that, because to him, he thought that was wrong. And I feel that we all collectively have work to do while there is child slavery. There's so many things that exist on this planet, even in the most beautiful areas of the world, even in Australia, New Zealand, beautiful countries. We're so blessed to live in these beautiful, beautiful countries. But bad things happen to people all the time with children. And so I think it is our duty to, while we're respecting that everybody's different, to also be able to make change, stand up for what's right, help where we can, to take people forward, so that ultimately, like, I have a vision that in 10 years or 15 years, we'll all be living in a more peaceful and harmonious way, where we are connected. And we're, like, even in families, with families being so fragmented, I've seen, just in the area I live in, Sydney, I've lived in Mossman, which is quite an affluent area in Sydney, for much of my time here. And you just see kids being kicked out of home because a stepmother comes in and they don't want to deal with a teenager. Like, that's actually cruel, and that really puts that child off to a very bad start. And while we're doing that, there's unconsciousness in the planet. I'm not saying that in a judgmental way, but when I see that, my heart just feels full of pain for that child. That's just an example, but could give you a lot of examples. I've been a kinesiologist and I work with clients, and you hear so many sad stories that that are happening in this modern day. One of my greatest inspirations is Wilberforce. I don't know if you've seen the movie Amazing Grace, but it's incredible. He was one of the youngest prime ministers in the UK. And he started up the RSPCA. I think they've got a different name for it in the UK, which is incredible. He's a great animal lover, which so am I. His house was absolutely chock-a-block full of animals, and I love that. It was so beautiful. And he also abolished slavery in the UK, but it wasn't easy. It was really hard for him. That was his calling. That was his life's purpose. But it was a hard life. But at the end, he did achieve his mission. So I think collectively we're on a mission at the moment to take the world forward to where there's not everyday violence or abuse is accepted as normal, as the norm. I do think, I'm not anti-alcohol. I enjoy a glass of wine every now and then, but I do think alcohol creates a lot of damage in families, and that's so widely accepted. I just can't believe it that still exists in this modern day and age, that people are born into families where they have to put up with abuse, everyday abuse, because of alcohol. And yet that's such a widely accepted it's a drug really in our everyday society. So as you know, there's so much love and light in the world, and I think the world is a very beautiful place, but we have work to do, you know, to get it to the next, what's possible for us as humans, where we can, you know, hand on our heart say a child's going to be born into a family where they're not going to be abused right from the get-go, and then they have to spend years undoing all of that so that they can feel reconnected. And I know that is part of our journey, but I think this is about evolution for us. Yeah.
I 100% agree with you. And it's one of the reasons I'm so outspoken and always saying that we as older people, let's just call us the elders, you know, we have a responsibility to stand up, to speak up, to start actually taking a stand for a healthy society. Because what I have seen as well is that yes, the new generation that is coming through, and they're quite awakened and they're extraordinary, and I'm not negating that in any way sense. But if I have to hear one more person going, oh, the future is going to be fixed by the latest generation that's coming through, that's not fair on that generation, number one, because they have passion that is not yet tempered with wisdom, right? And the wisdom only comes from experience, the good, the bad, and the ugly, until we actually sit down and go, okay, wow, what have I learned from my life experience? I feel like the youth's voice is extraordinarily loud at the moment because of social media and all the platforms that they have. And they're doing great. But they still need the elders to stand up, to give guidance, to have the healthy boundaries in place as well, to guide them and to nurture them, instead of, and I agree with you, so many families are broken. I was quite surprised when I moved to New Zealand and met a beautiful young teenager that my child met in a park. Complete stranger, and brought him to my home and saying, Mommy, can he sleep here tonight? Because his parents kicked him out of the house. I was like, what? How do you do that as a parent? How do you? And I didn't expect that to happen in a country like New Zealand, but I've been here for 7 years and understanding that as amazing as this country is, it has the same issues as so much of the rest of the world. And yet people still want to live like their head in the sand a little bit and kind of going, but this is not my responsibility. You know, I want to watch the news every night. I want to see what's going on in the world, but I myself don't want to take any active participation in speaking up against what I inherently feel is wrong, is out of whack, is out of integrity. I don't agree with that. I feel like we all have a responsibility, especially as older people, to take a stand for the good, to take a stand and kind of go, no, I get where you're coming from. And a lot of that is hormones, honey. And in 20 years from now, there's a different perspective. Let me start sharing it with you now. It's almost as though we, again, this is always so interesting for me, we evolve as society. And we tend to leave behind the good and take with us a lot of the bad. The good of tribal consciousness was the elders, was the responsibility that was taken within the tribe, the elders of the tribe, to guide, to nurture, to be present with those who were younger. And thank God that more and more women are starting to say, okay, I've raised my children. Now, what am I devoting the rest of my life to? And it is to society. It is to how do we make this a better world for not just my children, but for all children in the world, in whatever form your gift is, right? Sometimes it is in personal development. Sometimes it's in painting. Whatever it is that enhances the beauty and the love in our world, I feel is what is really required at this time. And again, that's not going to happen unless we have the diverse-minded conversations and the appreciation for diversity comes back. Because when we start understanding that, then we can start looking at society with compassion. And by the way, I define compassion as having empathy whilst holding somebody to their greatest standards, to their greatest potential. I don't see compassion as feeling sorry for somebody and giving them a get out of jail free card. No, because I believe in the greatness in every single human being alive as our essence.
Yeah, for sure. I could not agree more with all of those statements. And I believe very strongly too that it is time for the older generation to stand up. Like, it's quite common to grow up as a parentified child where you've had to maybe take responsibility when you were younger. That's not fair. We created all these problems, and we can't put it just onto the younger generation, go, well, okay, you're going to deal with it all now and you're going to get us out of this. They need us. They need us to guide the way. This is really extremely sad, but so many teenagers at the moment are on antidepressants, and Zoloft is one of those antidepressants. And just a few months ago, there was a worldwide shortage. You just couldn't get your hands on it because they just couldn't make it to keep up with the demand. So many of our young have been prescribed medication to get them through the difficult times and the effects of being isolated through the pandemic, which, teenagers, they need each other. So I don't think we've even realized the impact of that. That's going to be a mess that's going to have to be undone. And they can't, it's not fair on them. They need us. They need people to stand up, to be wise. And that's why it's important for us to manage our own energy, to make sure that if there is any little girl or little boy in us that's still wounded or needs healing, that we've worked through that so we can be that beautiful, wise person that you're talking about, and we can step into our greatness and support our young to step into theirs. That's our role, as you say. That's been lost in society. And one of the biggest passions we have at Blisspot, we have quite a lot, but is about the elderly, like, how wise and beautiful they are. And one of our most popular experts on Blisspot is in her 80s, Dr. Margaret Paul. She's an absolute celebrity in the United States. She teaches people about self-love. She's an absolute icon. She has so much wisdom to share. And I think this is relevant, but when I was in the car with my son, he was only about 4 or something, and we were driving by a bus, and he said, like, what's that about? Or he might have been a little bit older, because I think he could read, and it was about not being abusive to the elderly. And he was just horrified. He just went, why would people abuse like the old? They're so amazing. Because he loves his grandparents to pieces. And then I had to explain that to him. Well, it's not like that for everybody. So again, this is coming back to this. We've got things to do. We've got work to do. We've got to make sure, as you say, reinstating that natural order of things, where they've done studies on people, and the people that live to the eldest, I think it's Okinawans in Japan, they live to 120. And the reason they found out for that was because as you get older, you're seen as more and more beautiful. It's like such a privilege and an honor to age. Every wrinkle, it's like just more and more beauty. And I love that. And I think I'd love that to be a general philosophy and feeling that we have in the West, because we've lost that to a large extent, actually, with all these horrible concepts like granny dumping, where people, this is a true thing. I've got a friend who's a doctor that worked in a hospital where on Easter weekend, when families want to go away and they don't want to have to deal with the elderly, they're put into hospital or they're just dumped somewhere. And that's a concept that's quite foreign to me, but it does exist. So, how disconnected to be doing those things to people that we would love the most, our mum or dad. So anyway, yes, interesting.
You were talking about alcohol earlier, and I've had severe experience with alcoholism throughout my life, with people in my life being alcoholics, and so I understand completely what you're saying. And yet, that is just one of the self-medications that people are using right now. It is social media. A lot of people are using that for self-medication, entertainment, antidepressants, whatever they can get their hands on. Alcohol is just one.
Yeah, there's so much.
Right?
Yeah.
And why do we keep being okay with that as a society? Why do we keep being okay with people self-medicating? Why are we so okay with people suffering when, quite frankly, even prescribing antidepressants, that is just like treating the symptoms? Like, nobody is kind of going, no, it's time to actually get to the root cause, people. Like, we are so disconnected as a society with presence, with the inner calibration. How can we possibly expect ourselves to create a beautiful society? And I also feel like sometimes part of the issue, the puzzle that I'm observing, is that there is a conversation happening that it's hard, that it's painful, that, for us to reclaim our wholeness, for us to heal, is a hard and painful process. And so a lot of people who need it the most are the ones who go, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to get stuck in therapy for years. I don't want to have to go through that. They have one bad session and they go, I don't want to have to do this on an ongoing basis. And maybe it's time for us to have a different narrative around that and go, well, actually, wholeness and thrive and well-being is our natural state. So how do we start supporting a narrative of that's the easier part? The suffering is the hard part of life. And I know, because I've done that, I've lived it, I've experienced it. And so maybe that is where women like us can start a new conversation for people, in that it doesn't have to be hard, and it doesn't have to be painful, and it doesn't have to be like a script for years of self-torture. That health and well-being can be easy and fun and natural, and it can be everything that we are not talking about right now. Maybe I'm just playing devil's advocate. That is a new conversation that needs to be invited into spaces right now.
Yeah, well, I think that's true, but I think there are a lot of aspects there, because I think we're in this quick society. So people will take a pill, or be prescribed a pill. Like, even I know at the schools, the school my kids went to, they had 2 psychologists working there, and they couldn't see anybody because they were too busy. All they could do was take them in and recommend them to Headspace or wherever people needed to go. It's hard to get into psychologists now. So people are looking for a quick fix. And, but then the problem with medication has its place. I'm not criticizing that, because sometimes it really helps people while they're working through things, and it can be very humane. So everything has its place, but as a dependency for long term or for life, that's probably not so healthy for your body. So, and you're sort of got away from using your natural resources or connecting to that true loving place within. But I think also too, for personal development, I think, yes, it is about, there's a lot of aspects to it that can be fun and easy, but if you've had a big trauma, like, you can live in denial for that forever, and you can just keep it within and just pretend it's not there and focus on this is probably not what you're talking about, but you can do the massages and go walking in nature and meditate and all of that, but that trauma is still going to be there, and that takes a lot of energy to keep it down. It's like holding a giant beach ball underwater. And I think personal growth does have courage. That's why, in all those beautiful movies which tap into major themes like Lord of the Rings, or, there's the battles where we're really battling with our ego or coming to terms with that or making peace with that, so we can move forward in new and enlightened ways. I think that's a common theme of mankind, or the hero's journey that we all go through or have the potential to go through. So that does take courage, though. And sometimes people are not ready. They don't have the support. I find that when you're ready, when the universe kind of all aligns you, and when you've got that support around you, sometimes those big issues will come up for healing. And another thing which I'm embracing more and more in my daily life is that we clean our teeth every day because we want to have clean teeth. We eat nice food every day because we want to nourish and nurture our body. We exercise because we recognize that's really important. But do we look after our mind every day? I think a lot of people are starting to do that through meditation, mindfulness techniques. But I've got a friend who has an absolutely incredible life. It's beautiful. She's doing the work that she loves. She's got a beautiful relationship. She lives in an idyllic location, but she does processes, they're called inquiries, maybe 3 or 4 times a week. That's where you get together with a friend, because that's her premise, is that we, as humans, we are social and we like to be with each other. We're not meant to struggle alone all by ourselves, trying to work it out for years on end. Like, that's probably where the joy or well-being or looking after your mental health can be fun. You can get with somebody. Usually it's probably somebody who's trained in the process. She works with people that are actually trained in a specific process. But I realized, wow, that is a way of life for her. That's not just going to a counselor for 3 months once a week and then you do a stint. It's actually a way of life. So everything that comes up in her life, she said, you can do an inquiry. It can be about everything's going well in my life this day. But if you've been triggered by somebody, you're processing that in a very safe space. And I thought, maybe that's something that we all need to move towards doing a bit more. It's not thinking that looking after our mental health is just a deep thing here or there when we're struggling or really stuck or can't go forward anymore, but it's more like a way of life for us, where we have the tools to be empathetic and hold that beautiful compassionate space, as you say, where you're very loving, but you see the highest good in that other person as they're exploring their stuff, and you get a lot of clarity out of that going forward. So I think it's integrating processes that support us, help us to not feel alone, that we can get through things, because to be at our highest good, sometimes we do get lost. And especially if we're struggling by ourselves and dealing with our own mind that's telling us we're not good enough unconsciously, or we're not worthy of good in our life, that can be really hard. So I think there are lots of ways now where we can connect and maybe making this process more of a way of life. I think people that practice yoga, 2 or 3 times a week, have that. They're always processing things and constantly letting go and surrendering and letting more of that beautiful energy, letting go of our patterns and past behaviors and things that don't serve us anymore, and inviting in those new, beautiful, loving ways to take us forward.
Absolutely. And my invitation to our listeners is, so I believe life is art. Instead of thinking that there's a process that you have to do in order for you to be a certain way, just practice things every day that enhance your state of being. I do inquiry every single day, not because of a belief that I have to do it, but it's an art that I practice as part of my life as an artist. So for me, every day, it's how do I practice something that focuses on my connection with source? How do I practice something today that focuses on what's going on in my mind? How do I practice something today that really brings presence to my physical body? How do I practice something today that is creative in my art to a gift to the world? How do I practice my partnership with other people today? So when you start just practicing things, it doesn't become part of a to-do list, which is interesting in how often we take really good intention things and make it a to-do, and then, oh, we're so hard on ourselves if we didn't do the thing that's on the to-do list. It becomes just another thing to tick in the box. Instead of just living like an artist and go, what do I practice as an artist? I grew up as a ballet dancer. You practiced at the bar every single day, not because you had a show, but because you're a dancer and that's what you do. You practice pliés, you practice, whatever it is. And I feel like that's what happens with a lot of yoga people, is they just practice yoga. There's an unattachment to the outcome, and you practice because of the enjoyment of the practice.
I love that.
You practice because you enjoy the practice. And again, it brings me back to that interdependentness of we are not alone, and nobody needs to prove that they can do this on their own, whatever that is for themselves. But I do invite discernment in who you surround yourself with, and who you practice certain things within your life. Use discernment, because energy does matter. And if you are surrounding yourself with people who are constantly on a lower vibration than you, you will calibrate to their level. They will not calibrate to yours. So that's just also something to keep in mind. Now I'm looking at the time, and I've not even asked the question that I normally start the show with.
I think we can talk forever, because I've got heaps I can say about that. But yes, let's keep on track. Yeah.
And because we need to start wrapping up this conversation, sadly. But I do want to ask the question of all questions, Deborah. What does it mean to you to be an unapologetic woman?
I think it's just embracing what I'm here to do. I have a very strong purpose. I've always known it. So it's really just stepping, more into that daily, feeding on what you just said then, or expanding, or in response to, I think success is not the way to happiness. Happiness is the way to success. And I think being an unapologetic woman is really having that self-belief, because it is easy, especially when your path is not particularly easy, to doubt yourself or feel like you're doing wrong, or it's not for you. But I've believed in myself so often when I don't think another single person in my life's believed in me. I go, all right, well, I don't really care about all of you people. I believe in me. Like, even if people will try to tell me with my business, I'm not saying I don't take on good feedback, and I've got good advisors and mentors. Of course, they're amazing. I'd be nowhere without all those beautiful people. So I'm not saying that, but sometimes I've just said to people, I'm not going to let you tell me that I can't do that, or that you might think that about me, but I don't think that about me. So always holding the highest opinion of yourself, because it just gets you through the times. And then other people, they'll see it over time, and they'll be like, oh, I was there on a journey. They'll act like they believed in you the whole time, when maybe they actually didn't, but that's okay too. So you just, always believing in yourself no matter what, but also being prudent too. And because, sometimes it's good to be open. Being open is good as well.
What's the last thing you want to leave our listeners with today?
Just to really, I think, believe in yourself and find that thing that makes you happy, or gives you happiness. And things that give you joy are your answer. That is your answer. Like, often we somehow unconsciously believe we're not good enough, or we don't deserve joy, but you do deserve joy. Joy and happiness is your birthright. Health, that's all totally what the universe wants you to be. Is healthy, happy, vibrant, excited, engaged. And if you're not on that path, it will give you clues, and they'll start off as probably like a little pebble, and then a stone, and then a rock, and then a boulder, and then maybe an avalanche if you're not listening. And they'll be like the big crises of life, health issues or major relationship issues, that you're not on the right path for you. So listen to your body. My biggest tip, actually, now that I've thought about it for a few minutes, is to really tune into your body and what's going on for you and what's right for you, because your body is the most powerful supercomputer that you'll ever find, built exactly for you to guide you on your path through life for that happy, healthy journey. But the thing is, we get too busy, we get cut off at the neck, and we don't listen, and that's where everything goes wrong. So just tune in, take that time to listen, inquire, find out what's right for you. It's like a perfect GPS to guide you on your path to happiness.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So, to our listeners, I want to build on one of the statements that you made. You said, success is not the path to happiness. Happiness is the path to success. I want to build on that and say happiness is success.
That's a Buddhist saying, just so I make sure it's credited to the right people. But yes, so
I don't know, but yeah, for me, happiness is success, because I think a lot of times people want to be happy so that they will become successful, but the happiness is the success. And there's so much that I'm grateful for in my life, for the happiness that I get to experience every single day. I would love to know from our listeners in the comments, what was your experience of this conversation? Because I think one of the things that we talked about is that we all get to have a different experience of this conversation. And I would love to hear from the listeners. What was your experience of this conversation? And then reading some of the other comments and seeing how different it was to yours, with open-mindedness, with just they got to experience it like that. And let's make every experience the right experience for the person who had the experience. Yay, I think that. Thank you so much for being with me today, Deborah. That was an amazing conversation. Thank you to all our listeners. I know this was a long one, but there was just so much, and we could go on for hours. There's so much to unpack in this conversation. You might want to listen to it twice or 3 times. So thank you so much. We will join you again next week. And always remember, we get to live our legacies unleashed, unapologetic, and unlimited. Have an amazing day further. Cheers.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram at The Unapologetic Woman and on LinkedIn at Elle Nagy. And if you're interested in experiencing the Unapologetic Woman Friendwork Soiree, book in for our next open meeting at unapologetic-women.as.me/unapologetic. Thanks again, and I'll see you next week.